Hi, this is Tim Weber coming to you with another video on human development, looking at the first 2 years and psychosocial development, psychological and social. So, looking at emotional development, part of psychological development, in the first year, there are many developments. Now, newborns, hard to tell exactly what emotions are going on there, but we can distinctly identify distress and content. Distress as the baby is crying and making grimacing faces, and contentment when they seem to be, just much more able to enjoy things and begin to even coo and those kinds of things. So by 6 weeks or so, there's another development, and we see a social smile when others are present. The baby smiles, indicating enjoyment. By 3 or 4 months, we also can see evidence of curiosity and laughter that seems to be indicating the emotion of joy. And then by 6 months, we can also see specific anger and frustration appearing. Um, Now, that anger and frustration at this point can be perfectly normal. We also, in some babies, see evidence of sadness and potentially infant depression. So, what would indicate that in a child this young? Well, if we see that they're withdrawing and not interacting with others as babies normally do, if they're having trouble sleeping, again, more so than babies normally do, if they lost their appetite, all of those things, especially if they occur together, might indicate infant depression. Oh, of course, and then also constant crying and so on, also. That's really important. If we notice this, that we have some professional attention to that, because that can be very serious. Depression raises levels of cortisol, and just as the baby's brain is developing rapidly, that those high cortisol levels can interfere with proper brain development. So it's important, if we see indications of this, to get the child to a professional that can evaluate and intervene if necessary. Now, by 9 months, you also will see fully developed fears. Now, yeah, earlier than that, you can startle the child and they'll jump and they'll be afraid. But this is fear of specific situations and specific people. And one of these we refer to as stranger wariness or stranger anxiety. And so in this case, the child, when encountering strangers, is evidence of fear, even sheer terror. Now, the stranger the person, the greater the reaction generally. This generally will begin around a year and peak at maybe 14 months and then slowly taper as time goes on. But quite interestingly, uh, when children are about this age is frequently the time that Santa Claus appears at the mall, and parents want to have the child sit with Santa Claus and have a picture, and then they wonder, well, why is the child freaking out? Well, consider, well, how strange is Santa Claus? Santa Claus is pretty strange. And if they're that age, they're going to be wary of strangers to begin with. So don't be surprised if they kind of freak out at that age. Now, the other one that appears is separation anxiety. So the child shows fear when separated from important people, uh, their caregivers, their mother, so on. Again, this tends to peak around 14 months and taper off. So let's have a look at some um, little bit of very good advice regarding these two types of fears, and I think you'll find this useful. Here we go. Okay, so skip to where it actually starts. This is about stranger anxiety. Must be nice, stranger anxiety. And so here's a little bit more about separation anxiety.
Typically, we see an increase in separation anxiety in toddlers between 18 and 24 months. While that's a really exciting time for both parents and toddlers because it's all filled with excitement and exploration, it can be also daunting. It's the first time that they start to explore, but it's also the first time that they start to experience that mom and dad aren't here. It's important for parents to keep their game face on so that kids don't see distress on their faces when it's time for transition or separation. The longer we make that goodbye, the more difficult it is for kids to separate. And we sort of send them a message that this is a big deal. And really what we want to do is send them a message that this is really normal and it's going to be okay. Sometimes when we've been separated from our toddler, we make kind of a big deal when we get back together. And it's better if we make those as casual as possible so that kids start to see that, oh, this is normal and this is how we do it and it's okay. Have a consistent bedtime, have a consistent bedtime routine like reading books, bath time, maybe a snack, some time in with kids just before bedtime. All those things are very reassuring for kids, and if you can keep that consistent day to day, it helps reassure them that everything is going to be okay and this is just how we do it. Usually about age 3, you'll see a decrease in that initial separation anxiety, and that's usually just because of lots of repetition, lots of practice. When the child's worries and fears really interfere with the parent's day-to-day functioning, when it's really become unreasonable to be able to function as a family and for parents to do what they need to do to raise their children and to.
Okay, yeah. And at that point, I'd like to say, yeah, if it's a problem for the family, yes, that might be an indication that some intervention is necessary. But also, if the child is not able to function as they should be at that age, I think is really important. So I wanted to interrupt there and pick that up. So, just some general things about that. One of the things with separation anxiety that wasn't mentioned too is sometimes having transitional objects can be helpful. That's something that the child associates with that caregiver that they're separated from. Sometimes you remember Linus in the Peanuts cartoon, if you've ever seen those, he has that security blanket that he carries around with him. Some object that is comforting can be helpful. Also, slowly introducing them to situations where they're separated from mom or primary caregivers is important. Should also mention that some of this is likely to appear in very unfamiliar situations, even when the child's a bit older. Going into preschool after their third birthday, that's pretty stressful for a lot of kids. So you'll see some of that, and it's kind of normal at that point when they're 3. But they should begin to overcome it within a few days of going to preschool. And if this is still going on and there's still severe separation anxiety weeks later and the child is well beyond their third birthday, then yes, we might want to look for some assistance in intervening and helping the child to deal with that separation anxiety. So those are just some additional comments I want to make in addition to those videos. Okay, so let's move on then to emotional development throughout their second year. Generally, angry responses and fear taper as you go through that second year. Emotions become more specific and more thought out as well. And we also see the development of some new emotional responses that were not seen before. That's the development of these social emotions, as I call them. Pride, shame, embarrassment, guilt. what these all have in common is these emotions require that we have an awareness of other people, that they can evaluate us, that they can think about us. And so until we have that awareness, these emotions don't arise. Now, a lot of these emotions also are sort of rooted in family relationships. And so which of these is more prevalent may depend upon the child's family and what they encourage. So in some families, they really encourage kids to have some pride in whatever they're able to accomplish and so on. And so you'll see more of that. In other families, they may encourage the child to experience more guilt and shame and not to think too highly of themselves. And so that's what you're going to see more of. Some of that also may be cultural. Some cultures also will encourage more pride. Other cultures, not thinking too highly of yourself. So these emotions are shaped by the family and cultural surroundings. Now, the child is also learning cultural display rules for emotions. And so when to display those emotions, when it's not. And just as an example, we're teaching kids this all the time. And so in how we interact with the child, this may communicate these cultural display rules. And this is real common. You'll see, a little boy falls down and gets hurt, he cries, and then, they'll tell the kid, oh, come on, be tough. Boys are tough. Boys don't cry, or girls, if they get angry, so, oh, that's not ladylike. Don't be so angry, right? And so we're actually instilling those display rules. Now, the question is, do we want to teach those display rules, or do we want to maybe teach other rules of emotional display? Okay, so social development is very important at this point in time, and we'll be picking up many aspects of this, including the development of simple self-awareness. So self-awareness is the realization that you are a distinct individual, that your body, mind, and actions are separate from those of others. And according to many researchers, for the first 4 months or so, the child has no real sense of self. They sort of see themselves as being kind of part unity with their mother, all one and the same. And so that might also, help you understand why it's possible separation anxiety with mom leaves. Well, part of you is missing, you might say. Um, by 5 months, so you'll begin to see some awareness of that person being separate from the mother. They will seem to indicate to some extent this. This really doesn't take off until you get to between 15 to 18 months, and there's this emergence of what they call the me self. So we can now be the object of our own knowledge. We can know things about ourselves at that point. And as children begin to get this sense of self and being an individual, also this is the point where you'll see that they will become very possessive of certain things. It's me, it's mine, and so sometimes we have to help them learn to overcome that and share their things with others. So in studying this business of self-awareness, one of the classic experiments was done by Lewis and Brooks in the 1970s, where they used a mirror test to try to determine whether children had self-awareness. And so I'm going to just play the video here, and then we'll have some comments on it.
Who's that in the mirror? This is known as a mirror self-recognition test, which may offer clues about the development of self-awareness. Without alerting the child, a mark is placed on its forehead.
The baby. Where's the baby?
Usually, a baby younger than about 18 months doesn't make the connection between itself and the person in the mirror. The child may even look behind the mirror for the stranger it sees.
Hi. Hi. Dad.
But by about 18 months, there's a change in the child's awareness. Now it notices the red dot and the link between itself and the image in the mirror.
It's not ready.
What's not red?
My this. My head.
Over the next few years, children go on to fulfill their human birthright, constructing an increasingly sophisticated sense of self. They will have a rich and complex life of the mind, and a sense of being the central characters in their own dramas.
Okay, so there you go. They're kind of, showing you how that classic self-recognition experiment, was done, where they would put a mark on the child's forehead or somewhere on their face, and then have them look in a mirror, and they assumed that if the child did not try to investigate that as part of their own face, that they didn't have self-awareness. So what they also found is that, babies a year didn't really get this. You didn't really see many of them getting it till you got to, say, 18 months. By the time you got to 2 years, you got about 70% of kids then, checking out that mark on their own forehead in recognition that the person in the mirror was themselves. So that's where they get this idea that this is how self-awareness develops. Now, I'm going to say, I have some reservations about that, because I think that self-recognition may be a little bit different than what we think of as self-awareness. But it is true that as self-recognition increases, evidence of self-awareness and understanding and knowing that one is a separate person and beginning to know things about yourself does seem to accompany that. So the development of self-concept follows closely on this development of self-recognition. We can't say that. Now, this also suggests that, hey, once you recognize that you are a separate person, well, you can also recognize that there are others that are separate people as well. And so this then begins to build the foundation for theory of mind. In other words, recognizing that other people have different attributes than you do, and that they can think differently, have different emotions, and so on. So this is a sort of a foundational thing to get us there to begin to engage in social interaction with others at a much more complex level. Okay, so let's go from there to, that's where we'll end this segment. There are a couple more segments to fill out the rest of the chapter. So have a great day. Pick up the other two as you go along.